The Afghan-American Chamber of Commerce serves the interest of its members through numerous programs, advocates for a free and open market economy in Afghanistan, and endeavors to strengthen U.S.-Afghanistan economic relations. AACC's annual U.S.-Afghanistan Business Matchmaking Conference is the world's leading event for promotion of the private sector, business matchmaking, and investment in Afghanistan. AACC works to ensure that Afghanistan's economy and employment of the Afghan people remains a top priority for the U.S. and Afghan policymakers, and serves as a link between business and government to encourage progressive economic policies that will result in increased business, job creation, and investment between the U.S. and Afghanistan. We believe that peace and stability can only be achieved in Afghanistan through the success and growth of the private sector. It is the goal of AACC to promote the exchange of information and provide resources to its members through investment conferences, seminars, networking events, publications, and other avenues to stimulate U.S.-Afghanistan business and investment. The Afghan-American Chamber of Commerce, facilitating U.S.-Afghan business, investment, and trade ties.
Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Afghan-American Chamber of Commerce, as the chairman of the board, I would like to welcome and thank everybody for participating in our 13th annual U.S.-Afghanistan Business Matchmaking Conference. We're delighted to have many of you from the years before, and again from all the way from Afghanistan and Dubai and other countries join at this conference. Please apologize the late start. I know some of you may have issue coming into the building or with the weather and traffic, and also some of the registrations and badges, so we're working on it. Hopefully we'll have more people joining as we speak. Also, we have, for those of you who require translation in Dari or Pashto, we have headsets available. We have live simultaneous translation taking place, and headsets are available back there. If anyone needs translation, please pick up these headsets for translation that is available by our colleagues right there. As Jeff mentioned, we had our welcoming reception last night, and today is our first day of conference. It will be until 5, and we have an award dinner reception this evening at the JW Marriott. We'd like to welcome everyone and ask all of you to please participate. And tomorrow we'll have the conference again here in the same ballroom with afternoon sessions, one-on-one sessions today and tomorrow. I'd like to especially recognize and welcome some of our distinguished guests from Afghanistan who are here. We have Ambassador Mohib, who is here with us, and he'll be speaking shortly. The embassy has been instrumental in preparing and working with us in this conference. We have also Mr. Faruqi, advisor to President Ghani, who has come all the way from Afghanistan. We have Mr. Atiq Nasrat, the president of Afghanistan Chamber of Commerce and Industries. We have Mr. Habibi, the head of the aviation for Afghanistan. He will talk about the future vision for civil aviation and export economy. We have Mr. Azizi from ATRA, Chairman Azizi. And we have Mr. Bismillah from ATRA as well, board member. We have, Deputy Minister of Mines, my apologies. I should have a list ready with me, and again, my apologies. People give me different papers, and if I miss anyone, my sincere apologies on that. I also like to quickly thank our sponsors. Without their support, we will not be able to have this conference. Their logos are shown on these screens, and they'll have booths or tables across on the next room where you can visit them and talk to them one-on-one. I'm going to quickly mention the sponsors. We have Ronald Reagan Building as our platinum sponsor, TriVision as another platinum sponsor. We have as a gold sponsor the Bayat Group. You will hear more from them later on. We have Chemonics, another gold sponsor. They have a booth there as well. Washington Mortgage Group, another gold sponsor. We have Emerging Consulting Group as a silver sponsor. Access Group, Bashiri, Said Abdul Nafi, Page Group. We have Zohag Village, Mr. Zargham. And we have My One Wall Construction Company as silver sponsors. Creative Associates, they're a bronze sponsor. Natural Stone Processing Company, they're another bronze sponsor. IDS International and Arya Gyms, they're our bronze sponsor for this conference. At this point, I'd like to ask Jeff Grieco, our president and CEO for AACC, to say a few words and set the stage for the conference. Jeff?
All right, if we could cue up the PowerPoint, that would be great. So, a couple of scene setter notes. So today we were going to have the Secretary of Commerce, potentially as our keynote from the US government, but a small thing happened. The head of the European Union and the French President Macron decided to come to Washington and speak to a joint session of Congress, which happens once a year for any head of state. So the time slot is this morning. Every cabinet member had to be at the Capitol Hill this morning for the next 4 hours for the speech and the post-speech camaraderie that usually goes on around that. So our hope is that the Secretary will be able to make it either today or tomorrow, or maybe at the dinner tonight if we can. We're still working it directly with the Secretary's special assistant, and we should have an update, I hope, for you later today. So let me begin, if we could. First slide. A little background on AACC. Many of you know AACC, but many do not. And we just want to make sure that you leave the conference understanding that we've been around a long time, doing a lot. Next slide, there you go. So we are a nonprofit incorporated as a 501c3 in the United States. Basically, our founding principle is that we wanted to establish and are implementing a market-oriented focus for an Afghan national economy with government institutions that help strengthen and regulate a private sector-led economic development platform. So the work that we do is focused on market-led development, private sector-led development. And so that's why we take the policy positions that we take on issues related to Afghanistan private sector. So initially, in the early years, 2002 to 2007 and 8, we worked closely with all departments of the US government. Next slide, please. We worked with Department of Defense, USAID, the State Department, and a host of other organizations and donors, including donors from Europe like GTZ, JICA from Japan, and others, to implement programming that was supportive of private sector-led development and that really got into the transactional phase of policy and implementation, because in the early years, we knew capacity development at the government level was the most important focus. But now we're transitioning away from that focus and really focus now on the business of business, and that's focusing on transactions in international trade, transactions in international investment. So we believe we are the leading organization globally when it comes to the United States and Afghanistan, both on the membership side and on the policy side. We spend a lot of time educating policymakers, congressional leaders, on what it is that Afghanistan is doing successfully and where are the areas of challenge and where does the United States need to target its assistance support long-term. And we really serve kind of as a bilateral facilitator between both the business community in Afghanistan, many of whom are our members, and the American business community, many of whom are our members and are represented here at the conference today. Next slide. So in our 13 years of sustained work in the sector areas and in the policy areas, We now have had hundreds of members that have been involved in different activities that we've done here in Washington, in Kabul, in Dubai, and in other locations. We attended last year the India-Afghanistan Trade and Investment Conference, the Pathway to Prosperity in Delhi. Very successful conference where over $200 million worth of transactions were signed by Afghan companies with Indian companies, mostly India purchasing from Afghanistan. We are diversifying our programs. We've now set up a private, with our biggest partners in Afghanistan, a private investors advisory council to help talk about the challenges confidentially with them, that they can feel that we're a trusted partner for them, to understand the biggest issues that they have, maybe with issues of finance or facilitation of finance, risk mitigation, government policies, U.S. government support that maybe needs to be enhanced in certain sectors and so forth. So that working group meets regularly. We had our large meeting in January. We invited Greg Huger from USAID, the Assistant Administrator for Afghanistan and Pakistan. Greg participated in that meeting as well. So, and we encourage any of you that are interested in joining the advisory council to please talk to us. We've also had a very aggressive ICT working group, and we're very honored that we have the ATRA organizational leaders here today as well, and they're going to be on our ICT panel later. ICT for us was the single largest success story from the early years in Afghanistan, and then it went through a period of a downtrodden, and now it's coming out charging, I have to say. And that's why when last night at the reception, if you were there, we talked about, we really feel that we're picking up a lot of momentum now on the private sector side, and I think ICT, and you'll be hearing from board chair of ATRA, Mr. Azizi, you're going to hear about the momentum that they're moving forward on 4G market liberalization and on a host of other things, including the open access policy. Next slide. So we offer a lot of different business services and support. We do a lot of training, especially promoting women. We have a full panel at this conference just on the target discussion about how to help women overcome challenges in business inside Afghanistan. And we're very proud of the people that we have coming from Afghanistan, from the Afghan Women's Chamber of Commerce and Industry, who are coming just to be able to participate in that panel. Next slide. So our board is represented this morning down here at the reserve tables down front, and we have more board members that are going to be coming throughout the day because sometimes they are working two jobs at the same time, and we're appreciative of all their work. I might note that we have of counsels of Mr. Eniat Qasimi. He's a lawyer with a major U.S. law firm here in Washington and has been very active with us working on the international trade area, trying to figure out a solution for the lack of a bilateral trade agreement or bilateral investment agreement with Afghanistan. So we're working with him and as of counsel on that. We also have of counsel Dr. Robert Vosch, who's down here in front. Robert's been very active with us on a host of areas. You'll find his article in the membership resource guide on customs open window for Afghanistan and where we need to be looking to build more access for trade. And he's an expert on this, having worked at Deloitte and a host of other locations and companies as well. All right, so let's get into I'm going to move very quickly, so strap in. We're going to go through a quick analysis of, from our perspective as business leaders, how is Afghanistan doing right now? Next slide. Next slide. So right now there are three main drivers for Afghanistan's state fragility. The first is that it's had weak state and political institutions, but that's improving. That we've invested a lot, the donor community and Afghanistan itself, into building up those institutions. They depend a lot on deep state processing. This is maybe a lot of career staff and ministries who've been there for a long time and now have to reorient how they've been doing government work from the way they used to do it 20, 30 years ago in these institutions. That takes time to change. It also takes a new generation of leaders to come in, youthful leaders, and that's happening very quickly too, and we're happy about that. The second driver, obviously, is the persistent Taliban insurgency, bolstered by some of the issues with Pakistan and Iran, and we know that that has helped to slow government implementation. Not the fault of the government in those cases, but we have to get security under control, and the new strategy with the Trump administration on both Afghanistan and in South Asia is going to help to address that, we feel. The third driver is the internal ethnic divisions that have really exacerbated some of the past conflicts and so forth. Next, please. So based on that, we had pretty much a pretty steady increase in civilian casualty levels from 2014 up to earlier this year. We think now with the troop surge and with 16,000 United States troops now inside Afghanistan, in addition to DOD and other support personnel, that we should start to see, in partnership with Afghan troops, a significant benefit longer term, and we hopefully will see a decrease in civilian casualty levels going forward. We know that that impacts people's decisions whether to stay in Afghanistan or flee, and that is the reason why the Afghan diaspora is the largest percentage diaspora of the global refugee population that's been moving around into Europe and other places, and is now, some of them, moving back because they're more hopeful. And we think a lot of the reason for the returnees coming is not just because of forced returnees, but a lot of them have made a decision that with the U.S. commitment, maybe we now have a chance, and so they're willing to go back into their communities and invest and build their businesses again. Next slide. From a business perspective, and so when I'm representing this today, I'm representing it on the discussions we've had with very senior CEOs of major Afghan companies, as well as companies that are used to working inside Afghanistan. They're feeling, and some of this also is from the donor community too. We did attend the Brussels Donor Conference and had a lot of discussions and events there where we participated in. So overall, the National Unity Government is not seen yet as functioning as well as it could be. There's going to be a lot of conflict we expect in the run-up to the 2019 election, and that's understandable. But what we want them to focus on now is really scaled implementation, not looking for small transactions, but trying to do larger investment transactions that'll have both a job creation impact and an impact on infrastructure inside Afghanistan, most important of which is energy and electricity. There is donor frustration, but again, we think from our conversations with the bank and the donor community, bilateral donor community, that Geneva could for us show a real turning of the corner. Like we talked about last night, it's not just the momentum, but we're turning a corner that Afghanistan and the government is really achieving a lot more deliverables now under the US and Afghanistan Compact. And I think you'll hear some of that from some of our speakers as well. And President Ghani will be talking about it in a few moments in his video intervention. Corruption. So we get probably 2 or 3 emails or calls a week from Afghan businessmen, American businesses that talk about the corruption that's going on and how do they deal with it. They don't want to necessarily talk about it publicly for fear of getting targeted. So we've encouraged them to communicate with us, and then we'll try to explain both to the American and to the Afghan governments the kind of things that we're hearing, and then we'll try to focus it always on a solution going forward. So the corruption issue is still a major issue, but as President Ghani is going to talk about in his video, you're going to see that they are making great progress, and we support it, and we think that's the right approach. But it's not just the national corruption, there's also provincial and local corruption as well that our businesses have to deal with. Next slide. So I'm going to talk very briefly, if I could, about energy as a sector. I'm not going to go through this whole slide, but the energy sector is a sector we think that needs to be one of the prioritized sectors going forward. So at this conference, we're going to be talking about energy a lot. Energy, mining and extractives, ICT. These are sectors that we think have not just job creation and growth potential for the economy, but they're really at a place where they're ready for major investments to be announced. And Chairman Bayat, who's going to be receiving our annual leadership award tonight at the dinner, and you'll hear from him this afternoon at around 3. He's going to talk about his new energy contract that he's finalizing with the government. That is exactly the kind of leadership and investment that we hope to see. More private equity deals coming about under an IPP structure, under the law of Afghanistan, now that they have an IPP law, and a host of other things. Also, they've made progress on CASA 1000, on the Turkmen 500-volt line, the rehabilitation of Naglu Dam, and Kajaki 2, which we'll talk about during the conference as well. Next slide. On ICT, for us, always, connectivity has been the key to really improving Afghanistan's growth prospects, ensuring greater regional integration as well, and you need a strong Afghan-based cellular, mobile, telephony, and internet-based economy to be able to get there. We think the early donor investments were great, but now it needs a new series of investments, and now it doesn't need to be funded by the Department of Defense or by USAID. These can be funded through private financing based on the licenses and the spectrum that they're going to be receiving. And our ATRA chair will be talking more about this and the positive things that are happening in this space. Next slide. Mining and extractives. So the AACC hosted the mining minister last month here in Washington. I think she did a spectacular job. She answered a lot of tough questions that came not just from our government, but from our mining community and partners who want to get active in Afghanistan in extractives, but maybe were turned off by previous concession things that happened and so forth. So we want to focus on looking forward. That's where we're going. So she answered every single question put to her. She told us when there were things that she still has to work on to fix, and that the president is committed to helping her to do that. And I think that was exactly the right answer at the right time for us. And we're in the process now of trying to get U.S. mining companies and major multinational corporations from the U.S. and Canada interested in mining again in Afghanistan. Next slide. We're going to go, next slide please, we'll go through private sector development. So our recommendations going forward, we call it an emergency solution because we think we don't have time to wait. This president has put a time clock, I think, internally on seeing results. He's a business guy, and that's what, if you've read his books, and I encourage you to read his books if you want to understand the way he thinks about these kinds of things. He wants to set goals and either achieve them or explain why we haven't, and then move forward on trying to reset that objective. So our goal is to make sure that we are looking at this as emergency, critical kind of activities that need to happen. We can't wait 18 months to do some of these things. So some of the highlights that we've already presented to the Afghan government directly and to the United States government is, first is to increase the flow of capital and private financing that's going into the private sector. So one note, you're going to hear from the World Bank speaker at the conference. They're going to talk about the new IFC World Bank lending window and some of their new de-risking financing vehicles that they have, which I think are very exciting and accessible to you as businessmen and women. Secondly, we want to see greater risk de-escalation. So for that, we're looking for USAID under DCA to provide more guarantees. We're looking for first loss risk sharing. That could be through MEGA or through USAID in some respects. There could be blended finance options that are presented as well that would be helpful and maybe not yet available fully inside Afghanistan from Afghanistan's banking sector because it's still maturing. We want to get more access to finance for the entrepreneurial community in Afghanistan to start either expand existing businesses where they've proved their concept and they need to be able to expand regionally for exports, especially exports. That's really where we want to go. Or we can make a significant impact on import substitution. PPPs, you hear a lot about PPPs now from the Afghanistan government. They now have a PPP law. They have people in government ministries now in charge of making sure that the PPP sector is getting up and running quickly. Having worked in the largest PPP provider, USAID, I know this is a complicated and sometimes frustrating thing for an industry partner to come in and understand how to do a public-private partnership together. But there are ways that we can help. AACC and USAID actually has a very strong office on public-private partnerships, and we'll look to working with you if any of you are interested in specifically in energy and power and ICT, where you think a PPP structure might be the best structure and the way to get your financing to conclude your transaction. Lastly, we want to look at thinking big. So this means for us, don't look at just your role as a company. If you get stalled or you can't seem to find a way forward, it may be that your best approach is to form a consortium. I've done this successfully in Korea and Russia in my previous life, and I know that this can work in Afghanistan, where you make the government a partner, but a small partner, and you have a multinational corporation as a major partner, but the Afghan partner is the majority partner. And you work together on developing the business strategy together with that partnership long term. And those work very effectively and have worked effectively in Central Asia and other countries as well. Next slide. We've talked about IPPs already, coal. So Afghanistan is the only country in the world that the World Bank has made an exception to do clean coal energy development. And what has happened since they made that announcement 18 months ago? Basically nothing. Afghanistan has an unbelievably wide dispersal of coal resources, and it's one of the cleanest coals there are in the world. It has a very high methane count, burning at a very high rate, in a cleaner rate, And right now, you're going to hear more from us, and Congressman Ritter will be talking about this. He's going to be leading our new mining working group, and his panel will be talking specifically about coal during the conference as an energy resource for Afghanistan that can be set up quickly, effectively. You can have a portable energy unit brought in near the mine, so you don't have to worry about the big transportation cost issues, but we'll talk more about that later in the conference. Next slide. We have done a lot on mining. We believe that, we've laid out here solutions that we feel are easy and considered solutions for the Afghans to go forward on mining and extractives. I'll just say that cement is one that there's a couple major RFPs put out by the government this past week on cement because Afghanistan is importing an outrageous percentage of their cement from Pakistan. It could easily be done here in Afghanistan. And there are very competent Afghan companies that are already doing cement that would like to bid on more of this business. We also think there's a very interesting play in lithium. We're going to talk about that at the conference this week as well. Lithium development is something the United States government has a very strong interest in, and it has a national security component to it that makes it important for a U.S. role potentially in that. And we'll talk at greater detail, so if you have any questions on it, please let me know. Next slide, please. Last slide. So just to give kind of updates, because not knowing where you may have come in to various activities that are going on in Afghanistan, I'll start with the left-hand side. So the Trump administration is being very supportive of the Kajaki 2 transaction. This is the expansion of the hydropower plant at Kajaki. They are still working on finalizing some aspects of it on the risk side, and that takes time to get that done. I really believe once we've done one or two of these large-scale transactions on the risk side with U.S. government and the Afghan government working together to provide some of that de-risking, that you'll see those templates being reproduced on other transactions with other companies in other parts of the country. So it's a positive. We are very happy to hear that they're purchasing a GE turbine manufactured in the United States for that power plant expansion, and we look forward to hearing more from GE later. ICT, we're going to talk about the 4G market liberalization. We are keeping a close eye on China and Iran, who are both interested in mining and already investing in mining inside Afghanistan. That's something the U.S. government's concerned about. We're interested in it from a business perspective to make sure that Afghanistan's getting the best deals that they can, and that these are in the formal economy, not in the informal economy, if you know what I mean, when it comes to mining transactions. Secretary Ross, if you don't know it, our U.S. Secretary of Commerce, is a former mining company owner. Not former, he still owns them, but they're in a trust. And so he's owned mines, knows about mining, knows about oil and gas, and has very specific feelings about Afghanistan and what he thinks that they should be looking at in terms of the mining investments. So gas for him he thinks is the primary area where he would look as a business executive right now if he was doing mining. We're going to hear on the opening panel this morning in a few moments from Sulaiman and our guests about export processing zones. This is something that has been discussed for probably 2 or 3 years in detail, but in the last few months has really hit the ground running, and we're very honored that Mr. Habibi is here, the Civil Aviation Department Chair, to talk about that, and he'll be signing an MOU this morning as well with the U.S. government on export processing zones. India. So initially the Trump administration had proffered the idea of having India serve as a partner on the economic side with Afghanistan, but now that the conference in Delhi happened in September, and there was so much momentum from the contracts that were signed and from the various business that has now started to emerge. In addition, if you're not aware, the Indians have won a number of energy contracts, including solar contracts, with the Afghan government. India is a real partner now on the export side for Afghanistan exporting to India, as well as on the investment side. Indian big firms coming in to invest in properties and in businesses in Afghanistan. There are now direct flights from Delhi and Mumbai into Afghanistan, multiple cities, and that keeps growing in number, and the cargo volume keeps increasing between them. So now we have an ability to have Afghanistan serve as a hub on the export processing side, and you'll hear our panel talk about that today. Okay, lastly is the Ghani government's successes. They've had a lot of them. They finalized this new transaction, or it's close to being finalized, with Bayat Energy. It's over 100 megawatts. There's several phases to it. I've seen 2 phases and 3 phases. But anyways, the bottom line is the commitments are made and the deal is going to happen. So we're very positive about that. There's a number of solar projects that the government is pushing right now. These tend to be off-grid, but there's also some on-grid as well. Solar is great for off-grid because of the smaller size. You can basically set it up anywhere. There are a number of those. We'll have a further discussion on solar. If you're interested, please come and see me about it, because we have a number of informational materials from the Afghan government, if you're not aware of them, on solar transactions that they're interested in. The government's been very good. They got the PPP law pushed through the parliament. The IPP law is now done. The World Bank and ADB will be here talking, as well as the World Bank, about their support for the private sector, especially on infrastructure activities and how private sector can better engage on those. We also have visa on arrivals. I know that Ajmal Ahmadi would be very upset with me if I didn't mention that he got the visa on arrivals done. So if you're a businessman or woman, you want to go into Kabul, you don't need to get your visa in advance. You can fly into the airport. You do have to show a bank statement that your company has assets of a certain amount. But if you bring that with you and you show, they have a separate line now set up for visas on arrival, which is awesome. That's what most of the Central Asian republics now have. So it should make it easier for you and your executives if you wanted to quickly go in on a day's notice and make a trip in to visit with some clients, you can now do that. And we're thankful for Ajmal and the President for making that happen. That was part, again, of the U.S. and Afghanistan compact. We know there are a number of new mining concessions that are going to be announced in the coming weeks. There will be some delisting of former concessions that have not worked out. We're very happy to hear that, because some of those have been sitting for 3 years, 4 years, and no action has been taken, where there could have been a lot of employment and a lot of positive things that happened from those concessions if they were active. So we're feeling very good that the momentum on the mining side is really picking up speed, and we should be able to see a bunch of things happen in terms of transactions by the end of this year. Lastly, I just want to talk in a broad sense that there's been a huge amount of work on the business reform side, not just the World Bank doing business indicators, but on others as well. We can provide you more detailed information on those. A lot of those are contained in the U.S.-Afghanistan Compact under the business reform section. It includes changes to minority shareholder rights and a host of other things, all very positive, and again, setting this private sector enabling environment for the future to be a very successful thing, I think, for Afghanistan, and making Afghanistan really be seen more as a business-friendly location, where that hasn't been the reputation, in spite of the insecurity, that hasn't been the reputation maybe till the last few years, and now we're seeing a difference in that. So we're very proud of their success in those areas. So I'd like to shift now, if we could, and I'd like to introduce the video from President Ghani. We asked, because he could not come, whenever a head of state comes to the United States, they have to be invited by the head of our government, and you're only allowed 1 visit per year. President Ghani usually does his visit during UNGA, because then he can see a whole host of heads of state and still do a U.S. state visit maybe during that trip. So he was unable to make it, but what he committed to do was to provide us with a video. And we're very proud to have him give us, it's about a 10-minute video. I'd like to thank Ambassador Mohib for helping us to get this done. It was huge help to get that lifted and here in time today. And so I'd like to introduce President Ghani right now to talk to us at this conference.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. Thank you for the opportunity to share some reflections with you. Let me begin by paying tribute to over 1 million American men and women in uniform who've stood shoulder to shoulder with us. If they are members of the Gold Star families, my particular greetings to them in the gratitude of a nation that is benefited and will never forget those sacrifices. Let me equally thank the civilians, diplomats, and Americans of all walks of life who've empathized, sympathized, and supported us. Particularly, let me pay tribute to the American taxpayer over the years. Has been extraordinarily generous in her support, or his support, with this nation that has been threatened, but has never bowed to pressures or to the threats of terror. As business is the engine of growth, and value chains are the best way of producing cooperative advantage for all concerned in the development of that value chain, in making legitimate profits. It's a pleasure to be able to share some thoughts with you, and I look very much forward to the results of this conference, where my colleagues, particularly Ambassador Mohib, will provide you a perspective on security and other dimensions of our reforms, will brief me. Let me thank the Afghan-American Chamber of Commerce for providing a forum in creating this opportunity. President Trump's South Asia strategy is a game changer. I thank the President and all key policymakers for producing in a different environment, an environment for which the Afghan people in the region were waiting for 40 years. In this context, the role of American business in support and engagement with the strategies of the United States and the goal, a secure Afghanistan within a secure region that can be the bastion for defending a democratic order in Afghanistan and ensuring the security of the United States is finally achievable. Let me get straight to the point. Our firms investing. Let me provide some examples. $600 million from the Al-Quzai Group in food processing is getting to the stage of production. Work is rapidly progressing on 6 factories, and we should soon see a transformation. $380 million investment by independent power producers. And one of the most significant is a $180 million investment in Kajakai, in the middle of Helmand, where a Turkish firm is finding it profitable to be able to generate 100 megawatts of power. $320 million of investment by 4 telecom companies in fiber optics. Still, 19 factories have been established investing in steel and related iron products. A $25 million investment by the Khan Group in Kabul alone reduced our import of steel by 35%. Chamber of Industry and Commerce states that we've gained self-sufficiency in 21 sectors and are fast moving on another 20. Prefab. Government investment in the first prefab factory in Afghanistan, producing 1 million cubic meters a year, but now estimated to be moving 3 to 3 million cubic meters, quickly followed by $20 million of investment by the Gulzar Group. Talc and Marble, both beginning 2 factories, one with 15 million in Nangarhar and another 15 million producing tiles and slabs to the standard of Italy in Kabul. I can provide dozens of other examples, but I hope that the key question is answered. Afghan businesses and those companies that know us are beginning to see a new climate, and they are investing. Is the region investing? Yes. So let me share a quick perspective from Central Asia. Turkmenistan invested in the railways to connect both the port of Aqina, the dry port of Aqina, and the dry port of Turgundi. It is investing massively in the expansion of power, namely electricity, to Afghanistan and beyond. And TAPI, of course, is no longer a dream or some would say mere speculation of 25 years. It's becoming a reality, and it's becoming a corridor, fiber optics, railway, power transmission, roads. This would be a key developmental sector where the security and warmth of tens of millions of families in Pakistan, in India, will depend on cooperation in predictability of supplies generated in Turkmenistan, flowing through Afghanistan to Pakistan and then to India. Uzbekistan. The Balkh-Herat Railway will be a transformative event because Central Asia will be connected to the networks in the Gulf and to South Asia. The government of Uzbekistan is making a commitment of $500 million of investment to be matched by us, and we are now looking for the rest to international financing. CASA is moving. Afghanistan is 1 year full ahead of schedule, but now the contracts have been opened in Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Pakistan, and it's feasible. The Lapis Lazuli, and besides that, we are going to have the digital CASA. Lapis Lazuli. The Lapis Lazuli corridor will enable products, people, and goods to flow from Afghanistan to Turkmenistan, to Azerbaijan, Georgia, Turkey, and beyond to Europe. Why? Why are these things happening? Why were they not happening before? Why are they happening now? First, because we're focused on removing the climate of distrust and confrontation between the government and the private sector. What's the vehicle? The High Economic Council has become the vehicle for a transparent and inclusive process of dialogue and discussion between the Afghan government and the private sector. In the last 1 month alone, I've presided over 5 meetings of the High Economic Council, and this is allowing us to tackle policy making and policy implementation rapidly and comprehensively. Second, the compact between the United States and Afghanistan, where one critical element is creation of the enabling environment for the private sector, is a time-bound series of commitments where compliance is total. Let me give you some illustration. Revision of the bankruptcy law, revision of the companies law, revision of the transport law, audits of major state-owned enterprises of companies, fundamental change in the visa regime where you, our distinguished interlocutors, will now be able to get a visa in Kabul and get it effectively and cheaply. Doing business indicators. We focused our reform agenda on meeting the doing business indicators, and an entire series office, Ajmal Ahmadi, has been doing a fantastic job in focusing our attention on doing business indicators. Procurement. I personally presided over a procurement reform process, chairing over 130 sessions. And this is bringing a fundamental reorientation between the private sector and the public sector, because procurement is both rapid now, credible, and soon we will be moving to electronic procurement. Tackling corruption. High-ranking officials, whether 3-star generals or deputy ministers, are now indicted. The Center for Justice and Rule of Law is proceeding with full independence and support. Corruption is not free of cost now. To those who commit it, they pay for it, and the nation is welcome there. Rule of law institutions. We've invested very heavily in the rule of law institutions. Our Supreme Court and Attorney General's Office and Civil Service Commission are now remarkable examples. The most significant change is the generational change. Leadership and management is being passed to a new generation, and I'm sure that this generation will become, like the GI generation of the United States, the great generation in Afghanistan that is going to manage the transition from insecurity and war to peace, stability, tolerance, and economic growth. We're tackling the basics Internet cost in 2014 to the Afghan Telecom was $96 per megabyte. It's been reduced to 13. In January of 2019, it'd be $6.50. Power. 7 new provinces have been connected to the power grid. Price has been reduced 6 to 7-fold. In 2 years, all centers of 34 provinces will be linked. And in 2 years, we hope to be anticipating demand rather than catching up with it from the private sector. Land. A land bank has been created for all public property, and a central database for all government properties has been established. Policy, bad strategies, not absence of strategy, but bad strategies that were incoherent, contradictory, or being replaced with clear roadmaps. Mining roadmap is one of those. Let me turn to my concluding remarks and to focus on American business. The United States is invested generously in blood and treasure. Afghanistan forever will remember this investment with gratitude. We, the Government of National Unity, have deepened and broadened the partnership with the United States by proving our willingness to sacrifice for our freedom and own and confront our problems. Afghanistan does not need advice now on reform. We are leading in owning and implementing. And this is being greeted with full support by our people. Our goal for 2024 in the economic area are very simple. It's straightforward. Getting to 9% rate of growth to generate $8 billion of domestic revenue and to change 7 to 1 negative balance of trade to a positive one. Tall agenda? Yes, in London also, when I said we will tackle corruption, defend our country, ensure democratic expansion of rights, it was seen as tall order. Nobody thinks now that that's a tall order. If you don't aim high, you don't achieve by aiming low. Your partnership is essential to the realization of this ambitious but feasible agenda. A feasible agenda is an agenda that describes both the goals but also the mechanisms and the partners in the business community in the United States, particularly in the area of lithium and rare earth, as well as the enormous other opportunities. Look at Afghanistan not as a domestic, as a national market. Look at it as a platform for an immense region of over 4 billion people, and your perspective, inshallah, will change. Let me conclude by once again thanking the Afghan-American Chamber of Commerce for creating and sustaining this important platform during the last 13 years. I look very much forward to your deliberations, to your suggestions, to your partnership, but particularly to your investments. Those investments will tighten our bonds, deepen and broaden our partnership, and bring value in meaning. We intend to purchase American whenever feasible, and we hope that institutions like OPEC and the Exim Bank will become instruments for leveling the playing field for American business. We fully intend to create this level playing field. Thank you, and best of luck with your proceedings. I look very much forward to a successful conference.
What a wonderful address from the President. Very inspiring. I hope our American business guys heard that message. He wants to buy American whenever feasible, so let's get in and make it feasible if we can.